One of the worst things that Putin did for Russia when he launched his ill-fated full-scale invasion of Ukraine was to turn other nations into outright enemies. Ever since 2022, the UK has been one of those enemies, standing alongside Ukraine to force Putin to stop. Now, without even firing a shot, the UK has done something that hurts Putin so badly that it has left him frothing at the mouth in rage. This is a 1-2 combo of body blows that signal the UK's intent to support Ukraine until the end of the war and beyond. A message has been sent, and that message has come in the form of money and more of the aerial killing machines that Ukraine has been using to such great effect against Russia's forces. We'll get to the drones in a few minutes. The first shot that the UK has delivered to Russia comes in the form of about $1 billion in new funding that has been pulled from the proceeds of frozen Russian assets held by the UK. The latest tranche of that frozen asset money arrived in Ukraine on April 15th by way of the Group of Sevens, or G7's, Extraordinary Revenue Acceleration for Ukraine, or ERA initiative, and according to the Kyiv Independent, it is part of a broader agreement between Ukraine and the UK that will see the latter deliver about $3 billion to Kyiv. Ukraine has been quick to thank the UK, while also rubbing this latest delivery right in Putin's face. Ukraine's Minister of Finance, Serhiy Marchenko, expressed his gratitude, stating, "I am grateful to the government of the United Kingdom for its consistent and resolute support for Ukraine in countering Russian aggression in the 5th year of full-scale war." The funding provided is targeted and will be directed to meeting the priority needs of the security and defense sector. In other words, Ukraine is letting Putin know that it has a whole lot more cash that it can use to spend on the weapons it needs to force an end to Russia's war of aggression. The odds are that this money will be invested into Ukraine's growing drone industry, which Ukrainian President Zelensky says is now producing millions of drones annually, and the PURL initiative, through which Ukraine can purchase Western weapons with the help of its European partners. But here's where things get serious for Putin. The $1 billion that the UK has just delivered to Ukraine isn't just part of a $3 billion promise between the two countries. It's also part of a program that was designed to pump many billions more into Ukraine's war machine. The ERA was created in the summer of 2024 as a mechanism to allow G7 nations to make use of frozen Russian assets on their territory for Ukraine's benefit. Those assets aren't being given directly to Ukraine. Doing that would open up a legal can of worms that offers Russia leverage to claim that its money is being stolen. Instead, the ERA enables the G7 to provide what will eventually amount to $50 billion in funding, which is provided as loans that will be repaid by the future flows of extraordinary revenues that are generated by the frozen Russian assets. In other words, the G7 is making Russia repay loans that are being given to Ukraine as a punishment for Putin's actions in Ukraine, and it's doing it without spending a dollar from the frozen assets themselves. It's a clever mechanism, and it means that Ukraine receives cash whenever Russia's assets generate revenue, which has left Putin and his Kremlin cronies seething in impotent rage. But $1 billion flowing into Ukraine wouldn't be the end of what the UK did for Putin's enemy. On April 15th, which is uncoincidentally the same day that Ukraine announced its latest cash windfall, the UK went from delivering dollars to drones. The Independent reports that the UK's Defense Secretary, John Healey, has unveiled a brand new drone package for Ukraine that is the largest that the UK has ever delivered. That package, which was revealed at a meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, will contain at least 120,000 drones of all types. If Ukraine wants to carry out more long-range strikes against Russia, it's going to get drones that can do the job from the UK drones for logistic support, reconnaissance, and carrying out maritime operations are also going to be part of the package, with the vast majority of what the UK is set to deliver having been developed on its own territory. That's what will really worry Putin. These aren't drones that are being built inside Ukraine at locations that Russia could target with its own missiles and drones, assuming that it could find them. There are drones being built on the territory of a NATO nation that Russia wouldn't dare target unless it wanted to spark a war with all of NATO. In other words, there isn't a thing that Russia can do to stop any of this. Just as we said, the rage is there, but it's impotent. This big boost of battle-proven drones will give Ukrainian forces the capability they need to defend their people and fight back against Russian aggression, Healy declared when announcing the new package, which gives us some further insight. The term battle-proven is very interesting. The UK hasn't been at war with another nation for years, so it hasn't had an opportunity to test the drones it's developing in combat. Yet, the drones it is going to provide to Ukraine are battle-proven. What this suggests is that these are drones that are already being used inside Ukraine, perhaps even having been developed by Ukraine itself, and now being built in the UK. If true, this is cooperation on a level that Putin never wanted to see between Ukraine and its allies. Money is bad enough. But when a country like the UK is building drones to spec for Ukraine's needs, Russia discovers that it has far more enemies than the nation that it is invading. The UK has also been setting the stage for the sort of mass production that enables such a large contribution for a while now. Back in September, Healy announced that the UK was going to start mass-producing drones to help fight against Russian aggression. That decision was made at around the same time that Putin was testing NATO boundaries by sending drones into Poland and other NATO-aligned nations. Now it looks like Ukraine is going to be the chief beneficiary of the early stages of this mass production. The UK's Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, also suggested that this ramping up of drone production would be done alongside Ukraine. This new partnership is a landmark moment, bringing together British and Ukrainian ingenuity to deliver cutting-edge defense drone technology to fight back against Russian aggression, Starmer declared at the time. Starmer was referring to an industrial partnership that the UK and Ukraine formed last year. So, the 120,000 drones that are going to come streaming into Ukraine throughout 2026 are about a year in the making. These are the sorts of partnerships that make Putin regret ever invading Ukraine. There's a lot more to talk about when it comes to the UK turning itself into public enemy number one for the Kremlin. But before we dig deeper into the real problems that Russia faces with the UK, there's the little matter of 120,000 drones and $1 billion in cash not being all that Ukraine will be receiving in the bumper package the UK is delivering. There's more. When he stood in front of representatives from 43 nations in Berlin, Healy announced that the UK will also be providing Ukraine with hundreds of thousands of rounds of artillery and thousands of air defense missiles, along with the drones. Both are vital for Ukraine. On the air defense front, Ukraine has already been developing a level of mastery against Putin's aerial assaults that makes it the envy of other nations. Ukraine's layered air defenses allowed it to achieve an interception rate of 89.9% against Russia's drones and missiles in March, which brings it a step closer to a 95% target that the Ukrainian Defense Ministry has set for itself. Hitting those sorts of targets is only made possible when Ukraine has the right mix of missiles, interceptor drones, and other air defenses. We don't know what air defense missiles will be coming from the UK yet. There are several types of systems used in Ukraine that the UK could supply with missiles, but the what matters less than the fact that thousands of missiles are coming in, which is the sort of volume that Ukraine needs to see to keep its air defenses strong. As for artillery, hundreds of thousands of rounds go toward Ukraine, cutting into the artillery advantage that Russia has held for much of the invasion. That advantage was already starting to look shaky in early 2025, which is when the commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces, Oleksandr Syrskyi, revealed that Russia's advantage had been cut from 10-1 down to 2-1 along much of the front line. Fast forward about a year, and the advantage is even shakier. Now, Ukraine has more rounds that it can launch at Russian defenses, which will also aid in the counterattacking strategy that has seen it regain almost 50 square kilometers, or about 19.3 square miles, in March alone. Thousands of rounds thundering down are only going to make other Russian positions weaker. We may see a lot more territory being liberated thanks to this most recent helping hand from the UK. Speaking of seeing a lot more happening, the UK may well have some other surprises up its sleeve for Russia over the next few months. But a quick side note before we dig into that, you're watching The Military Show. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is the perfect time to hit the button. As Russia is reeling from all that the UK is going to provide to Ukraine in 2026, It also has to deal with the fact that the UK is taking the threat being posed by Putin more seriously than ever before. Defense spending is going through the roof in the UK as it's just starting a decade-long plan of investment that will see it pour tens of billions of dollars into building more weapons. By the end of 2027, the UK will be spending 2.6% of its gross domestic product, or GDP, on defense. That will be the most money spent as a proportion of GDP since 2010, and the spending is only going to rise from there. By 2035, the UK intends to have increased its spending to 3.5% of its GDP, which is in line with the new NATO target that will ask its members to put 3.5% of their GDP toward direct defense expenditure and another 1.5% toward creating and executing on annual plans that will allow them to reach and sustain this new spending target. Bear in mind that real terms defense spending in the UK had declined by 22% between 2009 and 2017. Putin's invasion of Ukraine caused a spike in spending, and that spike is being developed into a sustained commitment to pour more cash than ever into the UK's military. Putin thought he was creating a new Russian empire when he launched the war against Ukraine, but he's really just woken up a military monster hundreds of miles away. Don't forget what all of this will mean for Ukraine. There's a partnership in play here. The UK is looking to actively boost its drone output and its defenses against everything that Russia brings to a war in the 21st century. Ukraine is currently the front line in a war with Russia that many in NATO believe could spiral out of control and engulf Europe if Putin is allowed to claim the country that he thinks should be part of the Russian Federation. In short, anything that the UK builds for itself as it boosts its defense spending is going to be something that Ukraine can use to fend off Russian aggression. More weapons will likely be coming Ukraine's way as a sleeping military giant awakens from its slumber. As for Russia, it isn't happy. Putin's favorite mouthpiece, Dmitry Medvedev, who has never said a thing publicly that didn't come out of Putin's mouth first, has been flinging threats around again. A day after the UK announced that it would be sending 120,000 drones to Ukraine, Medvedev started making threats. Specific ones, as it turned out. Russia says that it has a list of potential targets for aerial attacks, and it named RAF Mildenhall in Suffolk as one of them. There are also several companies inside the UK that Russia claims to have in the crosshairs, some of which are producing the types of drones that the UK is sending into Ukraine. Speaking on X in the wake of Russia's little revelation, Medvedev tried to double down on the threat in a post on X. The Russian Defense Ministry's statement must be taken literally. The list of European facilities which make drones and other equipment is a list of potential targets for the Russian armed forces. When strikes become a reality depends on what comes next, Medvedev claimed, before he delivered a warning that is supposed to send a chill down the spines of the UK and Ukraine's other allies. Sleep well, European partners. Worrying words for sure. At least they would be for the UK if it hadn't heard plenty of this kind of bluster coming out of Russia before. Every time the news breaks that one of Ukraine's partners has provided money or weapons, Russia tries to throw its weight around. By February 2024, Medvedev had already warned of total war if Ukraine's allies tried to push Russia back to the borders of 1991. The entire strategic arsenal of the Russian state would be used against targets in London, Washington, and Berlin, as well as Kyiv, Medvedev declared at the time. That threat came on the back of many others, including a pair in 2023. It's all starting to feel a little bit limp from Russia. As chilling as Medvedev's words are supposed to sound, they're nothing new from Russia. These are the types of threats that Putin's mouthpieces throw around whenever Russia feels threatened, and they rarely amount to anything concrete. The UK is standing firm. The drones and cash are still coming to Ukraine. Until the Russian missiles and drones start flying into the UK, it is going to treat Medvedev's words as what they've been since the UK started helping Ukraine, a whole lot of hot air. For now, the UK is determined to be a thorn that digs ever deeper into Putin's side. What we've just seen with the latest military aid and loan is the UK stepping into its own as a European powerhouse that is spearheading the charge against Russia outside of Ukraine. Do you remember the defense partnership we spoke about earlier? That's just part of a 100-year partnership that the UK declared with Ukraine back in January 2025. That partnership has a performative element in terms of its sheer length, but that's the point. It was designed to send a message to Putin that the UK will do everything it can to ensure that Ukraine remains a sovereign nation decades after Putin has shuffled off the mortal coil. The UK has also spearheaded the creation of the Coalition of the Willing alongside France. That coalition is intended to involve several powerful European nations that will act as a peacekeeping force inside Ukraine once the war with Russia is over. Again, the idea is to send a message to Putin that the UK and its allies not only believe that Russia will lose the war that it started, but the allies that Ukraine has gained as a result of the invasion will step up to stop a war like it from ever happening again. After all, this coalition, if it's able to follow through, would be putting NATO forces inside Ukraine. Another attack from Russia after the war ends would be an attack against an even more dangerous force. It's actions like these that have led to Russia becoming increasingly irate with the UK. Speaking to the New Statesman in December 2025, John Loff, who was the first NATO representative to be based in Moscow, said that Russia now considers the UK to be its number one enemy outside of Ukraine. Russia has started to single the UK out for acts of aggression, often via hybrid tactics like incursions on UK territory and cyber attacks, as a desperate attempt to stop the UK from forging even deeper bonds with Ukraine. None of it is working. If the UK is indeed Russia's number one enemy outside of Ukraine, it seems to be relishing the role as it sends $1 billion, 120,000 drones, hundreds of thousands of artillery rounds, and thousands of air defense missiles to Ukraine. As for Ukraine, the 120,000 drones may be the biggest headline in all of this. Why? More drones mean more death for Russia. The UK made its announcement following a month in which Ukraine's drones did more damage to Putin's invasion than they have done since the war began. Russia's forces suffered over 35,000 casualties in March, which Euromaidan Press says makes March the single deadliest month for Russia in Ukraine so far. Of those casualties, 96% were caused by Ukraine's drones. The terrors in the skies that were once mocked by Russia are now killing and wounding Russia's soldiers at a rate that far exceeds 1,000 per day. With the UK now supplying drones that enable better reconnaissance and more long-range strikes, Ukraine can focus more on building the types of short-range drones that are causing so much damage on the front lines. Hey, and Ukraine just so happens to have received $1 billion that will help it do just that. It's no wonder that Putin has grown to hate the UK so much. Outside of Ukraine itself, the UK is doing more than most to make sure that Putin's ambitions for expanding Russian rule completely collapse around him. You could even say that this is revenge from the UK. Just a few weeks before the UK announced the drones and the cash, Russian submarines were trying to worm their way into the UK's waters. Britain was a long way ahead of the game. It watched every move and mustered up a response that Russia never expected. Find out all about that incident in our video. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to the Military Show to keep up with our coverage of the latest moves made by Ukraine's allies.